Hello guys and welcome back. So this is the Python 30 days coding challenge, and today we're going to be talking about data structures and collections, and we're basically just going to be going over some data structures which are lists, tuples, sets, and dictionaries. So these are all data structures that are used to save data sets and information. So yeah, so let's just go into this right now. So the first that we're going to be dealing with is lists. So lists are basically just a sequence or collection of different objects. You can have integers, you can have strings, and you can also have other lists that are nested within your list, right? And then each element in your list has an index, right? So it has an index, and an index is basically a number that is assigned to the elements within that list, right? So for example, here you have, okay, let me just zoom in a little bit. So for example, here you have elements one with an index of 0, and then it just goes like that. So indexes, they start from 0. Just keep that in mind. Alright, so as you can see, this is how it is as well. You have the index, and then you have the elements, right? So when you want to create a list, make sure that you use square brackets. So basically you put in the information inside your square brackets, and then you separate the data by commas, right? So in this case now you have Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson is a string. We also have 10.1, which is a float. So we also have 1982, which is an integer, right? So basically you're saving different data types inside of this list, right? You can also have a list within another, nested within another list, but we're going to go into that in just a moment, right? So you also have to pay attention to the indexing, right? So you can access the last element inside of a list using the negative indexing. So just keep that in mind as well. So basically lists can contain strings, floats, integers, and like I said earlier, we can also nest other lists, and we can also have tuples and other data structures, but we're going to go into tuples after this. But basically a tuple is also like a collection, and you basically have you can have other data types in a tuple as well. So as you can see, this is the tuple right here, and it's already inside of this list. So now you have a string, you have a float, you have an int, you have a list, and then you also have a tuple inside of it, right? And then we also have list operations, right? So list operations are basically the operations that you can perform on a list. So yeah, so you can do slicing, you can take strides, you can do so much, a lot of things that you can do within a list, right? So in this case now you can slice this list. Maybe if you want to go from index 3 to index 5, you just specify the index, and then you'll be able to slice the list. So let me just run the first. So right here, so now you're gonna slice this list, right? So you're basically starting from index 3 to index 5, right? The reason why you're using index 5 is because um, you're using index 5 because you're trying to go from the third to the fourth index. So the last index that is here is not going to be shown. So it's not up to 5, but you have to, go a step further when you want to include. If you want to include like the fourth index, you use 5. You want to include the second index, you use 3 as the endpoint, right? So just keep that in mind. So as you can see in this situation now, you've printed index 3 and index 4. The last one is never printed, right? So just keep that in mind as well. And then if you want to add new elements to a list, you can use the extend method, or you can use the append method. So maybe let's say you want to maybe you want to extend the list to contain maybe some elements inside of a list, right? So these are the elements that are within the list. You have a string pop, and then you also have an integer 10. So now if you want to extend this list to have two of this data types imputed inside of the list, you use the extend. But in this situation now, if you wanna add the entire thing as a list, right? If you wanna add this entire list to it as a single entry, then you use the append, right? So let's see what this prints now. So as you can see, all these elements were added individually. So you had pop added, and you also had 10 added to the list, right? That's what the extend method does. So it's basically extending the list by adding new elements, right? But in this case now, if you just want to append, if you just want to append one element to the list, now in this case you're appending the entire data structure list, right? So you're basically nesting the list inside of this list, right? So let's print that and see. So you can see the entire list was nested within it. So now the index of this entire list only went up by 1. So basically it was 2 before. You had you had 2 elements before, 1 and 2, right? But now you have 1 2 3, right? So it only grew by 1. The index only increased by 1, right? Now you see this particular, the length only increased by 1. And then now you see this one as well. In this case you added 2 different elements, so now the length of the list went from 2 to 4, right? So just keep that in mind. And then the index also increases as well. All right, so yeah. So one thing about lists is they are mutable. So what that means is that you can change the elements of a list, and you wouldn't get an error. So basically you can okay, let's say for example this list A, you have these items disco 10 and 1.2, right? In this case now this is the entry for the list, right? But now let's say you want to change maybe an index, instead of, maybe you want to replace disco with hard rock. Now we know that disco is at index 0, right? So first of all you just specify the index with the list, and then you specify the change that you want to make. So basically hard rock is going to replace disco, and now you've basically muted, or you've basically changed the list, right? That's what it means by lists are mutable, right? They are changeable. So as you can see, before it was disco and now it's hard rock. So keep that in mind. And then you can also delete elements from a list. Now in this situation, now if you want to delete the first element, which was hard rock, right? You're gonna need to specify the index, and in that situation you would be removing hard rock. So as you can see, before there was hard rock, but now you removed it by using the delete command. All right, and now you can also convert a string to a list using split. So maybe the split method is basically used for converting a string into a list, right? So in this situation now we have a string hard rock. What do you think this is gonna do when you use the split method? Of course it's gonna split this into 2 elements of a list, which are hard and rock. Alright, so as you can see now you have 2 different strings rather than one whole concatenated string. Now you have 2 different strings within the list. Alright, so now we also have something called delimiters, right? So delimiters are basically characters that are used for separating strings and other elements as well. So as you can see, we have delimiters like commas, we have delimiters like this, like a semicolon. But in this case now, let's say maybe we want to split this string by a comma, right? So now basically we have this entire string here, and now we want to split it with a comma. So let's say, as you can see now, we use the delimiter, which was the comma, and now we specify that we want it to be splitted into different we want the elements of this string to be splitted into different strings, and also embedded within a list. So this is basically used for creating a list. All right, and yeah, so now we want to we want to create aliases, right? So basically, creating an alias is basically equating a list to another list. So you can actually do that in lists with lists, and that's why they're very mutable, right? You can actually assign a list to another variable, right? You can assign a variable to another variable and to take that value of the variable. So if you change anything within, let's say maybe you have A and these are the contents of A, this is a list of A. If you change anything within this A, it's also going to be affected. It's going to affect B because now you said, okay, B and A are basically the same, have the same value as list. So anything that you do to A will be affected to B. So basically you've made a copy of A, right? So you basically made an alias. Alright, so you can see the contents of both are basically the same now. Alright. Alright, now let's say maybe okay. Okay, now let's say maybe you want to clone a list. Hmm? So cloning a list, you would basically say, okay, B is, maybe you had A, right? Maybe you had A before, and A contained the list, right? So what you want to do now is you want to clone A and then assign it to B. So B will be like an entirely new variable of its own, right? It's gonna have the same values of the clone of A, right? So once you clone A, B automatically is assigned to the clone of A at that single point in time. But if you change, but unlike the copy that we did above, where we're able to assign B to A and A to B, and if you change any value in A affects B, or if you change anything in B affects A. In this case now, if you change anything in B, B is basically independent of A right now because you made a clone. So if you change anything in A, it's not going to affect B. That's the difference between cloning and making a copy. So just keep that in mind. Alright guys, so basically we're done with lists now, so let's move into tuples. We have a lot to cover, so I want to make this as fast as possible, but make sure that you guys still follow along. Yeah. So now let's say maybe we're still dealing with like a data set of music, right? So this is what we're going to be dealing with as data scientists. So this we're going to be working a lot with data structures and collections. So this is also like a way to get ourselves familiarized with everything. So this is like a data set, and you have like independent variables as the headers of the set, and then we also have like the data that has already been imputed in the data set, right? So yeah. All right. So now in tuples, right? In tuples, we can contain like different data types within a tuple, but the difference between a tuple and a list is a tuple is immutable, meaning that you can't change the values once you've assigned them, right? So let's and tuples are also tuples use parentheses unlike lists that use square brackets, right? So let's say this is a tuple, right? And now you saved maybe a string, an integer, and a float inside of the tuple. And yeah, you remember we also talked about typecasting when we dealt with data types. In this case, now you're typecasting. Once you typecast this tuple, which we have already assigned a value to, right? We've already assigned a value to this tuple. Once you check the type, you get a tuple in return. And indexing is it's also used in tuples, so it's basically the same thing. So if you want to access maybe elements of the tuple, then you can use like the index to access that. So if you want to print maybe the so if you want to print sorry, let me run this cell real quick. So if you want to find the index of the tuples, then this is what you do. If you want to find like the elements are here, you use the indexes to find them. So this is what you basically do. You use a square bracket and then you indicate the index within it, right? So just keep that in mind. If you want to see the result, that's why you have to print. You include it inside of a print function, and then you get the value of your index. And if you also want to know the type, you also use the type you use you use the typecasting to figure out of the what type of data structure it is, or what type of data type it is. Negative indexing is also used. So you remember the last element, you can be -3. Sorry, I mean the first element -3, and then that's because they're about three indexes, they're about three elements here, right? And then the last one you use -1. Don't ever forget that. To access the last element in a string, in a tuple, in a list, you always use negative indexing. Always remember. And you can also concatenate two tuples, right? It's just like string concatenations, but in this case you're concatenating two tuples. So let's say you had tuple 2, maybe you created like a new tuple 2, and now you want to include new elements within tuple 1 and then assign it to a new tuple 2, right? What you do is you figure out what tuple 1 is. So let me see what let me see if I can print. So in this case now, I just showed you what tuple 1 was. So tuple 1 was disco 10 and 1.2. But now we want to create a new tuple. Maybe we want to concatenate tuple 1 with another tuple, or with another information, with another data, and then assign it to tuple 2, right? So in this case now, we've already done that. We've assigned it, and now we concatenated tuple 1 with the information that we wanted, the data that we wanted, and then we basically created a new tuple from that. So that's how you concatenate tuples. It's an operation, so you make sure that you use the plus. You can also slice tuples to like, if a tuple has multiple values, you can slice it. So that's where like you specify one index, and then you move the index further. Let's say maybe you want to start from index 0 to 3. Remember, it's going to omit 3 and it's going to print from 0 to 2, right? Just like that. So keep that in mind. We've already dealt with all this in data types with strings, so you can always go back to that video if you're quite unsure of what we're doing here. And then if you want to get like the length of the tuple, you can also use the length, the len. You use length to figure out the length of a tuple. So in this case, we have about 5, so it should be 5 here. We have 5 elements, so it's 5. And then you can also sort a tuple, right? This is something that you can do with a tuple. And then you save it to a new tuple as well. So this is like ratings. This is the tuple in itself, right? And then now you want to save it. This is the rate. Let me see something. So this is the ratings. And now you want to sort it. You want to sort it, and when it is being sorted, it goes from ascending order. So it goes from the smallest to the largest, right? So in this case now we're dealing with integers, right? We're dealing with integers. Let me try something real quick. Let me say if I add a string. Let me see. Syntax error. Okay, so in this case now you can only save. I made a mistake with. That's why you have to be very careful. You can use quotation marks, but make sure that they're the same. In that case, I used a single one and a double quote. So make sure that if you're using single quotes, you maintain that. If you're using double quotes, you maintain that as well. So you see, you can't use the sorted method um, for different data types. So in this case, we had strings, we had integers, right? And then I went and included a string to it. So it does not work like that. So we have to be very careful. I'm just doing that to just demonstrate to further clarify what works and what doesn't work. So, but you can use like floats and integers will go together, but you can't do it with strings. Alright, so a tuple can literally contain another tuple as well, just like how we talked about lists. So a tuple can also contain a tuple within it, and it's called nested tuples. That's a process called nesting. Yeah, guys, so I'm just going to show you like the last thing that you can also do in order to access maybe an index as well. As you can see here, if you check this, you will see that okay, this is an integer, so this is an integer, and this is another tuple that has been nested within the nested T tuple, right? You have another tuple, you have another tuple, right? And within this tuple you have a string and you have a tuple within it, right? So now maybe if you want to access, let's say rock within the entire tuple, if you want to access rock, what do you think you're going to do? So first of all, you're going to use, let me just write it down within here. So what you're going to do is you're going to use nested T, right? You call the variable name, and then you use square brackets, and then you specify the index of the tuple that contains rock, right? So in this case we have 0 1 2, right? So 2, and now to access rock, now we are at index 2 0 1 2, so we are at this tuple, but now we want to access a string within this tuple, and in order to do that you just specify the index of the string within the tuple. So it's going to be 0 1. So now let's see what happens. So as you can see, now we've been able to retrieve rock from our data set, right? So just keep that in mind. Okay, now let's say maybe you want to access 2 inside of the entire tuple as well. So let's say, okay, so this is 0 1 2 3 4. So this is the tuple that contains 2, right? And that is 4. So that's the index of that is 4 0 1 2 3 4. So just change this to 4, and then now we want to access 2 within it, right? But now it's like there's a tuple that is within this tuple, right? So now you have like disco, you have another tuple inside, you have disco, and you have a tuple within it, right? So you're gonna have to specify the tuple that contains 2. So it's gonna be 0 1, right? We already have it as 1 here, and now we also want, now we're at 1, right? So we're basically just going deeper and deeper, right? So now we're at 1, index 1, right? Now we want to find out the index of 2. So it's going to be 0 and 1 as well. But all this is because we're trying to print 2. So let's write 1 again. So now we've been able to access 2 within it. So yeah, just take note about that. guys. So yeah, you can also use this to find indexes. Maybe if you want to find the index of maybe a character in a string, you can use the find method to locate that. So if you want to find the index of I, it's going to give you 1 because it's 0 1, right? So take note. Alright guys, so now let's move into something else. Let's move into dictionaries, right? So now what a dictionary? So dictionaries basically contain keys and values, unlike the lists and the tuples, which have indexes and then elements. In this case we're dealing with keys and values. So yeah, so the keys are just, indexes usually deal with numbers, but in this case the keys are basically just, they can be strings, they can be, yeah, they are just, yeah, it doesn't, it's not a number. So now we're creating a dictionary, right? So let's say we created a dictionary like that. So how this is assigned is, you have the name of the key. In lists and tuples we deal with indexes, but in this case we have keys, right? You specify the name of the key and then you assign it a value, right? You assign it a value or you assign it an element. So in this case now, key 1 is assigned to 1, right? Key 2 is assigned to 2. Key 3 is assigned to a list that contains 3 integers, which are 3 3 3, and then key 4 has a tuple. So basically a dictionary can contain a lot of things. It can contain lists, it can contain different data types, it can contain other data structures as well. Alright. So the keys, they can be strings, they can be numbers, they can be tuples, it can be many things. So just keep that in mind. So as you can see here, key, look at this key here. This key is literally a tuple and has been assigned to 6. So just pay attention to that very well. So now if you want to access maybe a value in a dictionary by the key, this is how you specify it, right? So in key 1 we want to access 1, right? So you just print it. What do you get? Okay, let me print this top one as well. You get 1, right? And now you want to access this last one. This is the key for the last one, right? The last one is given by 0 1. So now you want to access the value there. It's going to give you 6, right? So just pay attention to all that, and always remember that each key is separated by a colon, and then you put a comma to go past that index, right? So in this case this is Triller. So Triller is the key, and remember the string, you always have to put the quotes, right, for specifying the string. So in this case Triller has been assigned to 1982. Alright, so these are both strings attached to assigned to strings. So keep that all in mind. Yeah, so this is just basically a summary. I'm not going to in depth into all of this. So yeah, so it's just surface level, but we can all go back and do more research and have a deeper understanding of it. And then basically these are just basic other things. You can also append to a list. You can retrieve just keys. So maybe like this is the variable for your dictionary, right? And maybe you want to get the keys alone, right? You just you use the key method, this one right here, and then to print all the keys. So as you can see, it only printed the keys, it did not print their values. But if you want to print just the values, you can also do this. You can use the value method as well, values method as well. And then if you want to append like a value into the dictionary, you specify the key, right? And then you assign it to a value. So before we did not have graduation and 2007 in our dictionary, but now look at it. The last value here is graduation 2007. You can also delete entries. You just use the delete function or the delete method, and you embed your dictionary and what you want to delete inside of it, and then you will delete that entire key, including its value. Alright guys, so now let's move on to the final one, which is sets. Alright, so basically these sets that we're dealing with are still pretty much the mathematical sets that we did in high school, and when we're dealing with sets in general. Sets are a very important part of data science, and as we touch on this, I believe that you would agree with me. So now you see, a set is a unique collection of objects in Python. So the it is symbolized by curly braces. So wherever you see curly braces, you are most likely dealing with sets. It's similar to dictionaries, but in this case you're not assigning values, right? You're not assigning a key or a value, right? So look at how it works here. So this is basically a set, and then it has like a structure of a list. You understand? It has like the structure of a list, but it's not a list, and you will see the difference as we move on. So basically, look at how a list is, right? You can convert this list into a set, and yeah, so you can basically convert this list into a set, and after you convert it into a set, yeah, so the set usually arranges everything in ascending order as well. So it goes from smallest to largest values, right? And then also in alphabetical order as well. What you have to do with strings, it moves it from alphabetical order. That's why you see it rearranged in this sense. So if you just want to convert a list to a set, make sure that you include like the set method in front of it. So yeah, you're basically converting this entire list into a set, and it's going to print you a set, and once it's arranged, you would get exactly what you want. All right, so now we go set operations. So now you can use the add method to add values to a set. So you just used so let's say like this is the set that we have, and we want to add maybe this value to it, maybe we want to add this string to it. You just use the add method and you will be able to do that. And if you want to remove it, you use the remove method as well. And then if you want to check if this is included in the set, then you use this to find that, and then to return a boolean on if it's true or not. Maybe you say, if you change this to maybe like, let's say maybe you change this to BC, it's going to return false because it's not really there, right? Yeah, and then we have set logic operations. It's just like the one that we have in maths, the set operations that we have, right? Which have to do with union, intersection, prime, and all that stuff, subsets, complements, and all that good stuff, right? So in this case now, if you want to find the intersection between these two, maybe you have like two data sets, you have maybe an album and you have an album list, and maybe you want to find out if there are any intersecting data between these two data sets. You just use This you just assign it to a new variable, right? And then you use the and character, special character, and it will, once you assign it to intersection, and then if you print this, it's gonna print a dictionary with, sorry, a set containing the intersection between the two albums. So this is basically what album 1 has. Album 1 has AC/DC, and album 2 has Back in Black. You can also use the you can also use this you can use this operation, right? So you call the first album set1 dot union, and then you assign album set2. So once you print this, it will also give you what you are looking for, right? Sorry, I didn't want to use this. I wanted to use intersection. So as you can see, it printed the intersection between both, right? So you can also check if maybe album 1 is also a subset of this and it's false, meaning that this is not a subset. You can also check if it's a superset to return a boolean to tell you if it's true or false. So album 1 is neither a subset nor is it a superset of this. And if you want to have if you want to combine these two values, these two data together, you just use union, and then it will print a combination of everything. And keep in mind that when dealing with sets do not repeat two values. Thus, you cannot have inside of this data set, you cannot have thriller and you cannot have trailer again, right? It only prints it as one. So if you form like the union or two sets, it's not going to print any data, any element or value twice. It's going to combine everything and leave it at one, right? And now if you want to see the difference between sets one, basically that the complements between set 1 and set 2, you use the difference method, right? So basically set 1 has trailer, but set 2 does not have trailer. Alright, just keep all that in mind because they're very, very, very important information as you go further. So basically this is all we have to do for today. We basically covered data structures, and we've also treated the collections. So we've talked about lists, we've talked about tuples, we've talked about dictionaries and sets, and I hope that this was helpful. And this is also part of my journey, and I'm glad that you guys are following me on this, and we're also learning all together, right? So can't wait to see you guys in the next lecture, class, sorry, not class. In the next video we're going to be dealing with a whole new topic. We're going to be going into conditionals and all that good stuff.